Thank you all for coming for the last talk of the day. And we are joined on the stage with Validato and Goldilock, and they are part of the NCSC for Startups ransomware cohort. So we are basically just going to be a panel discussion. There was meant to be more of us on stage, but unfortunately a couple of people couldn't make it due to being ill. But yeah, so I'll hand it over to Stephen to introduce Goldilock.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move around a little bit because get a little bit more energy. I know it's the end of the day. So we're Goldilock. We produce a device which you can find at the back there. But first, before I would talk a little bit about that, I want to just set the geopolitical context of what we're in. Many of you have been watching maybe the Undeclared War, which is a very interesting. Actually, when Jeremy Fleming was meeting with us on Wednesday, he sort of says, "I don't really like the term war. I like to talk about cyber force for good," which I understand. It's a point, but we're in a war. That's a fact. Yes, we do want cyber force for good. But the reality is we're in a war on three fronts. We've got the Russians on one front that are geopolitical disruption. We have the Chinese that are continuing to engage in wholesale corporate theft. A recent Economist article 3 weeks ago would have told you that 75% of corporate theft is still being engaged by the Chinese and by the Chinese state-sponsored actors. And the third is ransomware criminals, whether they're in syndicates or individuals or in different forms. That war has a very different than the war that exists on the ground forces in Ukraine, because it's a different topology. Ukraine can't change its borders. We can in a cyber warfare. We can change our borders. And what we can do is we can reduce the cyber attack surface. That's the Ministry of Defense mantra. We can reduce the cyber attack surface and change the topology so that the criminals and the war criminals cannot continue to engage with us and steal our critical assets and disrupt our critical national infrastructure. And the way that we can do that is we do not need to be online all the time. You've just heard from Microsoft, and I think they did a great presentation, Joanna, but she also highlighted how much we're vulnerable the cloud is. And all of that, always being online all the time, is ridiculous. There is no need for us to be online all the time. If we are able to reduce our cyber attack surface, if we are able to control and take back our control to go online and offline when we need to, then we can incredibly improve our ability to fight these three evil actors on all fronts. And that's what our mantra is. We've built a device that allows you to completely go offline without using the internet. As long as you have and use the internet as a control device to allow you to go online or offline, you're vulnerable to attack. And that device back there allows you to actually disconnect your critical assets, your critical national infrastructure, whatever it may be, and to ensure that you are reducing your cyber attack surface and have it only online. Now, if there are some things which are online all the time, the other thing that you need is a ransomware kill switch. What do we do when we're in a situation? If you're a Colonial Pipeline, you scramble around for 2.5 hours trying to find where the cables are, and you pull the cables eventually in different locations. With our device, what you're able to actually do, send a text message, and it has a physical disconnect. It takes 5 seconds. And that's what you need to be able to do when you're under attack, if you have left things online. So, from our side, one of the biggest ways to deal with ransomware, and Chris has some great questions regarding some of the legal liability issues with respect to ransomware and where we're moving towards in this sector. We have to take a lot more control back of our cyber attack surface. So that's our mission. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, Andrew, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chris. So my name's Andrew Brown. I'm the CTO of Validato. And what we're busy doing to help address the ransomware scourge that is plaguing the world's businesses is we've put together a breach and attack simulation platform, which quite simplistically, what it does is it tests your cybersecurity controls. And I'm surprised that cyber has been around for so long without really this existing. Now, you might turn around and say, oh, but we've got pen testers and we've got red teamers and stuff like that. Very much so. Do they test your cyber controls? Absolutely not. Okay. I'm not saying that there's not a place for them. There's a very good place for them. What I'm talking about is when I qualified as an engineer, I spent a lot of time in the instrumentation and electrical field. And the way we used to test things and make them work is if I had a pump, for example, I'd press the green button to turn it on and I'd get a nice little light on that's saying it's running, okay? And then I'd have to test, okay, and press the red button and make the actual pump stop. And there was always an emergency stop button somewhere. And whenever you built something new, you'd have an auditor come along and actually you'd have to verify that all of this worked, which is standard engineering practice, okay, to make sure that these controls actually work. But then I got into the cyber field, and it just seemed to be fine that you could take the software that some vendor had told you worked, and you have another 10 vendors telling you that theirs actually works better, and you should buy their stuff because it stops more and it does better stuff. And there's this whole competition out there, and you just quite happily install it, and you install all these security controls all over the place, but you don't really actually get around to testing it. So as an example, what I mean and how you test it, think of something like your home security system. You put this really lovely infrared detector up in the corner of your room. Well, what do? You wander around and you see if you can find any blind spots in the room. And maybe you adjust it so there's no blind spots. Maybe you have to put a second one in the room because there's a pillar and there's actually a blind spot behind the pillar. But once you've eliminated all of those blind spots, you then go along and you look at the actual alarm panel and you say, okay, if I wave my hand in front of the sensor, do I get a message on the alarm panel? Yes, I do. So going back to our original, looking at have I got rid of our blind spots, that's very much the protection in cyber, okay? Is your protection actually working? When we sit and look at the message on the alarm panel, think of that as your SIEM solution, your events in your SIEM solution. Am I seeing the event happening in the actual SIEM solution? And then moving further on, it's do I get a response, okay? So does the, if I trigger this, do I get the police coming? Do I get a response from a company that is going to come and inspect my premises or give me an actual, visit or call to see if I'm okay? So what we're looking there at protection, detection, and then response. And that's exactly the same as what we're doing with our product, being able to do that in an actual cyber field. So once you've done all that and you've got it all working, you can then call in the professional burglar, which we liken to the pen tester, and say, absolutely, now please do your thing and see if you can actually break in. But there's no point in getting the pen tester or the professional burglar along unless you've done all the simple testing. And that's really the premise of our product. And we know from looking at so many companies out there that they've got a lot of IT people in them, and IT is about enabling business. It's about helping them. And there's a lot of really good IT people there, but are they the cyber specialists? No. They take the actual product, they install it, but they don't have the test tools to be able to understand, is it doing what it's meant to be doing? And they're also not necessarily the qualified cyber people, and business to a large extent sees cyber as a necessary or unnecessary expense on the bottom line, or a business disabler rather than enabler. So what we want to do is be able to enable business very cheaply, very easily, and help them have a better cyber posture.
Okay, so now we've had a nice introduction from both of the companies. We'll start with some of the questions. So I'm going to start with something focusing on reconnaissance. So what do ransomware groups look for in targets? How do they select their targets? And why are the companies which are selected?
Yep. So there's a lot of different types of ransomware groups that are targeting different types of entities, from the small to the large. One of the most common ones that we've been seeing is even putting bounties out for credentials for larger entities, particularly government run, or just those kind of entities that have reached that critical mass where the amount of staff that they have and their infrastructure is starting to get quite outdated. So there's a lot of vulnerabilities, there's a lot of unsupported softwares there, so that once they've got in, they're able to move very quickly. But also because of that size of the entity as well, the internal security training and the security awareness with staffing becomes quite a difficult task to do. So you have a lot of naivety from the IT side of things, and seeing that as quite a common entry point these days. So targeting the NHS, for example, or any of those kind of entities where they are struggling to keep their infrastructure up to date.
Yeah, just to add to that, I see there's some quite young members of our audience as well out there. Go and have a look and just do a little bit of a search on Google and do a search for a site called Shodan. That's Shodan. If you search for Shodan, it's a very useful resource out there. There's something called open source intelligence. And I talk to professionals every day, and I'm quite amazed about the lack of knowledge about what is out there about an organization in open source intelligence. And the beauty about Shodan is I can sit there and I can go onto Shodan and I can search the whole of the internet in a couple of seconds, and I can find every single publicly facing server that has port 3389 open. That's an RDP port that enables you to remotely manage that actual organization or that server. It doesn't take much to figure out or find out who that actual server belongs to, okay? Once I know who it belongs to, I can very probably log into it with an email address and a little bit of engineering, okay? And I happen to have an actual, username, and passwords follow quite quickly because I can brute force it. So this is just one type of example where, if we look at this and we look at the threat actors out there, it's a business. They earn money. They see nothing wrong with doing this, okay? So you end up with your low-level people using things like Shodan out there to go and find easy targets. All they're interested in is earning actual money. So when you end up on the receiving end of a ransomware attack, it's not necessarily because you were directly targeted. So it ranges from the one end where you're just randomly selected because you stood up a server in the cloud and you left port 3389 open and you didn't have a very strong password, to exactly the other end, okay, where it's a state-sponsored actor, and if you've got intellectual property, they're going to want to get their hands on that. And then they are going to put a lot of resource behind exploiting your organization.
Cool. Thank you very much. So being on the forefront of ransomware and fighting against it, have you come across any new or interesting techniques you have seen being used more recently or being used more?
I've seen an absolute cracker quite recently. So it's an evolution of the existing. We've got some screenshots here of you looking at some mucky grumble, and we're going to send it out unless you pay us some money. But the way that they handle it is they send you an email or a direct message through social media as a concerned citizen, and what they're doing is, hey, this website or this service or this group has got some information about you, and they're making statements about you, and it could be something like they're accusing you of being a paedophile, or they're digging out something that you may have tweeted in the past. And with the evolving sort of social standards that are expected today, it seems quite controversial what you might have said. And that's all they'll say. And no call to action. And what that's trying to do is invoke that emotional response from you. And then you want to engage with it. Well, what are they saying? You want to naturally defend yourself, don't you? And then they'll give you the call to action. They've got you then. And what it'll be something like maybe like a website that's password protected, so you have to sign up. There's one method of getting your credentials because you're not thinking straight. You know, someone's made an accusation about you, your emotions are high. So you're going to be maybe a little low on your defenses there. And then the second is, right, here's the accusations. And it's on a PDF or it's in a Word doc. And that's where the payload's normally included. And because, again, you're being accused of something, you want to defend yourself, what's going on, your defenses are quite low then. And you're probably in more an emotional state to not think so critically or quite in the right way. So that's been quite an interesting development I've seen over the last couple of months, that kind of approach.
Andrew?
So I've come across two very interesting ones, and one of them we've seen. I also do spend quite a lot of time on doing third-party assessments and looking at vendors out there on behalf of companies. And what we've seen during the pandemic is the rise of the rogue mobile application, and the ignorance around this, or the unawareness about it is quite prolific. I was having a conversation with a company the other day, and they said, well, why should we be looking at our vendors? Why should we be assessing them? And I said, okay, give me a list of your vendors and let's just run through them. And they interestingly gave me the company who they'd outsourced all their payroll to. So I said, okay, let's go through. I said, I've done the vendor assessment for you. I said, on the surface, they look all great. No, issues around that. I said, just one scary thing. They said, what's the scary item? I said, did you know that your payroll company's actually got this really neat mobile application? He said, no. He says, they haven't told us about it. I said, okay. I said, let me show you this application. I said, it's really nice. I said, you can submit timesheets, your expenses, you get your pay slip through it, okay? You can change your bank details. I said, so really useful application. He says, well, I'm going to make contact and find out why we don't know about it. I said, well, I can tell you why you don't know about it. I said, because they don't know about it either. It's a rogue mobile application that has been set up. I said, and what it's designed to do, I said, is extract all of that information from people within your organization. I said, and the way this exploit actually works is, I said, the threat actor will send your staff members an email saying, hey, we're the new payroll company. Please will you search for the new app we've just released, download it onto your phone, and if you happen to get any type of two-factor authentication message, please just acknowledge it and use your business credentials to log in. I said, the beauty about this whole exploit is, I said, the phishing email will whiz straight into your company. It's got no malicious link. It's got no attachment to it, okay? And the user's not going to think it's suspicious because they're not having to click on anything. They're not being taken anywhere, okay? I said, so they'll search, they'll download the application, they'll put in their details, and they'll acknowledge the two-factor authentication. The threat actor is now logged into Office 365. I said, we need one, okay? One out of 2,000 people, and I'd probably be targeting your finance department first of all around this exercise. I said, now I'm in, okay? I said, so go and ask the payroll company, do they have any services out there that look for rogue mobile applications? Are they telling their clients about them, and are they getting them taken down? And there was eyes opened all over the place. So that was the first one. That was a little bit obscure, but then it got even further. There was a beautiful article posted this week, and guys putting together Raspberry Pi kits with a little SIM card in them and a wireless card, and they're posting them to companies. And Because where's everybody? They're working from home. So it goes into the post room, and the good British postal system, you gotta love the British postal system, okay? It will deliver this item. It'll get put on the person's desk. It's inside the company. What's it targeting? The Wi-Fi network. How long is it going to be there for? Who knows? Could be a month or two before someone comes back into work. And if you're on the 19th floor of the building, how secure is your Wi-Fi? Because who's going to externally break into it? It's probably not very secure.
Cool. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. So a question for Stephen now. So should you pay ransomware ransoms?
Well, right now, the criminal liability for that already exists in law, and both for participating and being part of a crime and funding the crime. As we know right now, there is not much level of enforcement, but that is moving in the different direction, and there will be now more and more enforcement. There is now a strict liability offense, which means that you don't actually necessarily have to have intent, and that's when you're paying somebody within a sanctioned country. And as you know, that those countries have expanded, especially with the Russian invasion. So if you are paying to Russia, then it's a strict liability offense. Now, the other thing, aside from just legal liability, is also a moral liability. I mean, do you really want to be participating and involved in these levels of crime? And I mean, the obvious answer is no, because you're just funding essentially our enemies, and this needs to be stopped essentially by having better ransomware techniques. And I think that you will see more and more the U.S. is moving towards enforcing these and preventing the ransomware payments being made.
Thank you very much. So, last question before I open it up to the audience. If you do get hit by ransomware, how can you actually recover from a ransomware attack? How can you actually get your business back on track?
There's a lot of ways of looking at that, and it depends how well you actually prepared for the ransomware attack. Being on this NCSC startup program has been quite fascinating. There's a couple of the solutions who weren't able to make it today, absolutely specialize in that. And just chatting to, these guys, everybody says, okay, I've got backups, I've got all of these great things, until they get hit by the ransomware attack, and then they find out that they don't have the keys, okay, to actually bring the backup back. And actually restoring from the backup wasn't so easy, and the standby data center got hit as well, and it's actually quite a long story. So this very much ties in with the previous question, should I pay the ransomware or not? Okay, well, if you pay the actual ransom, do you know that you're actually going to get the keys to it? And it's such a challenging question around, nation states turn around and say, well, we eliminated hijacking because we didn't pay the hijackers. But, it's like comparing hijacking and kidnapping. If it's your child, are you going to pay the actual kidnappers the ransom that they're demanding because it's kidnapping? It's where you need to get in a specialist company, and it's best to understand that specialist company or find that beforehand. And also, if you've got the cyber insurance in place, they're actually going to, want to be involved. So how do you recover? You prepare well in advance and understand that it can happen to absolutely anybody. Talk to your insurance company, find out how you could actually do that, because really you're being very negligent with your business if you own a business and the business has done absolutely nothing about it in preparation.
Okay, so I think we've got 2 microphones either side. So any questions for the panel?
Hi. Do you see a clear path or like a timeline in terms of equalizing the playing field between small businesses in the UK and like state-backed foreign actors? Because it's quite an unfair fight right now.
Sorry, do you mean in terms of the ransomware threat?
Yeah, in terms of like small businesses getting ransomware, and what can they do to prepare? How long will it take for like most businesses in the UK to be ready to kind of defend against that threat at all?
Yeah, well, I think that we've heard a lot today from providers of different solutions to protect against that, and I think there's some fairly easy, elegant solutions. Just suggesting one of them, which is keep a lot of your critical assets offline. I mean, we're moving towards a level of data sovereignty. There's a level of on-prem data, and I think there's an analysis that you need to have regarding what needs to be kept online all the time. The function of time and hackability is correlated. So you really have to look at what level everything needs to be. And the other one is segregation of those assets.
Cool. Any other questions? Yep.
Hi. What's your opinion on community-led groups such as VX hosting ransomware samples available to everyone? VX being VX Underground?
Like the view about ransomware as a service.
So this is groups hosting samples of ransomware for researchers and other people to look at. Is it necessarily a good thing? Is this helping other people? Is this helping other people create different types of ransomware by having those samples available, or is it helping the security community defend against it?
There's a lot of good use of stuff hosted out there. I think one of the larger threats that the community is suffering with is similarly to having ransomware samples out there. If you go and have a look at the quantity of tools that are available, which are open source tools to be able to hack, crack, red team tools that have been written by communities, and they've been written for good purposes that are actually being used for bad purposes. It's a issue right the way around. So not only are we talking about, stuff that's being hosted out there. If you get onto the dark web, you can buy ransomware as a service. People are making money out of it. Unfortunately, it's just the nature of the business. With good comes evil.
Cool. Thank you very much. So any other questions from the audience? Yep, over there.
I'm just curious about, if security controls are going to be increasing to protect assets, what does the threat model for those look like? Is that going to be the future replacement for ransomware?
Sorry, can you elaborate a little bit more?
So, say enterprises sort of shift to protecting their assets with more security controls. Does that become a target for attackers? We can take an organization off the network by attacking the security controls. Does that make sense?
I had an interesting conversation with a company the other day, and if they've got it right, I think they might be onto something. And the conversation that I had with them was, it was around quantum computing. And the big issue with quantum computing is encryption. And if you've got enough power, you can break encryption. Because what you're doing is you're brute forcing and you're figuring out what the algorithm is. And they turn around and they said, well, they've moved a step forward from that, and actually it's irrelevant how much computing power you've got. The way they were doing their encryption gets around the whole quantum computing because of what they're actually doing. And I said, well, it's actually Friday afternoon, okay, and this is a bit much for my brain on a Friday afternoon to go into the details of how you're actually doing this. But basically, if you move into the realms of encryption, which cannot be broken using quantum computing, you're going to solve the ransomware issue.
I'd say one other thing, though, is that there are a number of security controls that are more accessible and possible to be deployed at that level. And I think they're highly secure. If we fund innovation, and that's one of the reasons why we're here as the NCSC for startups, is for innovators to bring solutions that are accessible for, as Jeremy Fleming says, defending the digital homeland, which is, I think, extremely important. As I spoke about, the attacks are on individual, unlike a regular war, which is among soldiers, although Putin obviously thinks differently. It's something which attacks every one of us. And that requires us to empower all the individuals, enterprises, to take back the control and take a level of security. And that requires a lot of British innovation and solutions that we can have that control. But we have to work together, and it has to be. We have to empower the companies to do that. So I think that's really important, that there is a groundswell movement, and we understand that every one of us is subject to those attacks.
So I think we've got time for one more question over there.
What's the panel's view on government agencies and divisions actually going after ransomware gangs that are impacting national infrastructure? With the colonial pipeline, I think the threat actors were suddenly very worried that they sort of got certainly the American government's everything's spotlights turned on them. Should European agencies, governments with the US and stuff start going after and almost attacking back, hacking back? What's the panel's view?
So I'm just going to put the disclaimer out there. I represent myself, and these are entirely my own views and not the views of anybody else. Absolutely. Why not? It's a threat to, national security. Why should they not go after them and take them down? The question is, where do you draw the line, with regards to the law? It's very much like turning around and saying, are we happy for our intelligence agencies to commit murder? Is that going to be something that's condoned in the national interest? So it then becomes sort of something that ends up in the courts, and who knows where it's actually going to be. My personal feeling, help yourself. Let's take them down.
But I don't think we should be weaponizing. I think it's very important for us to understand that we are. I do agree with Jeremy Fleming's point that Cyberforce should be a force for good, and we should not be getting down to those levels of weaponizing. So it is important for us to take action and respond, but that doesn't mean that we engage in that. I think we have to game it out. We can't be naive about the response. I mean, I'm an ex-soldier. I believe in the defense. I think it's really important. But how we do that, I think we need to tread very carefully.
Cool. I think that concludes our panel. So if everyone could give a round of applause to all our panelists.